In 2011, astronauts Brian, Jocinda, and Marcus are in the midst of a mission to fix a satellite when suddenly their systems start malfunctioning and something extraordinary appears before the strange metallic black swarm. This swarm comes at them and strikes the shuttle, knocking out Jocinda and severing Marcus's tether. Brian tries to grab him before he drifts away, but the shuttle pulls at his own tether and he loses his friend to the hazards of space. After re-entering the shuttle, Brian attempts to contact Marcus, but the systems are down. While he attempts to find a way to return to Earth, he doesn't notice the swarm entering a hole in the moon. Brian successfully manages to land the shuttle back on the planet, and initially, he's considered a hero for such a feat, but after an 18-month investigation, nobody believes his story, and Jocinda can't defend him because she was unconscious during the incident. NASA concludes the mishap was due to human error and dismisses Brian. He loses his home, so his wife Brenda and his son Sonny move in with Brenda's mother. A decade later, Casey Houseman is working as a janitor at the University of California and routinely sneaks into professors' offices to use their computer. He logs into Chile's National Observatory to utilize their telescope and even phones them pretending to be a professor, requesting a file with the moon's orbital tracking to be sent to his personal email instead of the professor. Afterwards, he rushes to his second job as a fast food cashier, but he barely works for a few moments before taking a break to check the email the observatory has sent him. His theory is correct. The moon's orbit is shifting closer to Earth. He attempts to contact NASA, pretending to be a doctor to be taken seriously, but it's futile. The only public phone number is for NASA's gift shop, and they lack a connection to the higher-up. Meanwhile, Jocinda is summoned to work incredibly early in the morning. After checking on her son Jimmy and giving some instructions to his nanny Michelle, she heads to the Space Center where she is informed that the moon's orbit has altered. Their satellite has also detected something unusual on the moon's surface, strange energy emanating from a hole on the crater floor. Back to KC, he's frustrated with the lack of progress through phone calls, so when he picks up the newspaper his cat urinated on and notices it's astronaut day at the museum, he prints his research and drives there. A group of children on a school trip mistake him for the one who will be giving them a lecture, so KC seizes the opportunity to present his theory. He believes the moon is an artificial megastructure constructed by aliens and therefore hollow inside. The one who is supposed to give this talk is Brian, who has overslept and is awakened by his landlord demanding months of overdue rent. Brian escapes through the window and drives to the museum, where KC immediately informs him about his discovery. Brian doesn't believe him and gets security to eject him, but before he leaves, KC throws his research papers at Brian, who picks them up and discards them in the trash. Later, Brian receives a call from Brenda asking him to turn on the TV. Sonny is appearing on the news because he was involved in a high-speed chase with the police. A couple of days later, Brian attends Sonny's trial and disrupts the proceedings by constantly interrupting the judge and lying in an attempt to defend his son. This results in the judge postponing the trial and remanding Sonny to jail until then. Afterwards, Brian argues with Brenda's new husband Tom, who is paying for the lawyer, over the phone, but Brenda cuts their conversation short. Meanwhile, KC visits his mother at the retirement home and tells her that nobody will listen to him. She replies that he should make them listen before she forgets who he is due to her memory problem. At the NASA offices, Jocinda shows Deputy Director Albert Hutchings their recent finding. The moon has entered an elliptical orbit, which means in about 3 weeks, moon debris will fall on Earth. Jocinda wants to return to the moon, but they lack the means, and Albert wants everyone to keep quiet about the issue until they come up with a plan. The request comes too late, though. An anonymous source has leaked the information online. Brian visits the judge and attempts to bribe him to free his son, but the judge doesn't have time to listen to him. Everyone is leaving the city because of the news, which Brian hasn't heard yet. He checks the TV and sees Albert talking to the press, explaining they'll send a lunar reconnaissance mission, and there's no reason to panic. Tom also wants to leave the city, but Brenda doesn't want to leave Sonny in jail, even if Tom insists his lawyer will get him out and find a way to send him to Colorado with. As cities worldwide experience mass migration, riots, and looting, NASA sends an SLS Block 2 to investigate the anomaly. Newscasts cover the official announcement, but also delve into conspiracy theories, including mentions of megastructure. Brian is stunned to hear this and returns to the museum to search the trash cans for the papers KC had left him. When he finds them, he checks KC's website and learns of an emergency meeting he'll be holding soon. The NASA shuttle reaches the moon and sends a probe down the hole, which descends steadily for a while until it suddenly starts ascending. As the computers show the moon's orbit shifting again, the same black swarm from Jocinda's mission emerges from the hole and attacks the SLS, killing all the astronauts inside. Meanwhile, Brian goes to KC's meeting at a hotel, only to find him surrounded by a few conspiracy theorists who can't distinguish reality from craziness. Brian interrupts his talk and takes KC to a restaurant so he can hear why KC knew about this before NASA. KC has been studying distant planets for years, searching for megastructures created by aliens, and was surprised to find that the moon is one. A megastructure has a rigid shell built around a power core, and something must have happened to the one inside the moon to cause it to veer off course. At that moment, the consequences of the moon shifting again begin terrorizing Earth. Coastal cities are now victims of storm surges and record tide. The city is starting to flood, and the attendees of the meeting can't leave the hotel, so Brian sends them upstairs for safety. Casey doesn't move quickly enough and is hit by a wave, so Brian jumps into the water to rescue him. Jocinda and Albert review the mission footage and conclude that the swarm exhibits signs of intelligence, indicating it must be an AI. Earth is not prepared to handle such a threat, so Albert resigns and appoints Jocinda as the new deputy director. This behavior raises Jocinda's suspicions, and she demands answers. Albert grants her his clearance so she can find the information herself. Jocinda goes to NASA's restricted area and finds footage of her last mission that confirms Brian has always told the truth. The swarm that attacked them is the same one they are seeing now. She is then approached by Holden Field, a former NASA official who can answer her question. In 1969, when the famous Apollo 11 landed on the moon, it lost contact with Mission Control for 2 minutes, or at least, that's the official story. In reality, Mission Control cut the feed so the world wouldn't learn about what they discovered on the moon that day. There were mysterious pulsating lights emanating from beneath the moon's crust, and NASA opted to conceal it because that technology was far beyond Earth's capabilities, and they weren't certain they could control it. Their last hope had been a military program known as Zulu X-Ray 7, but it was discontinued due to budget constraint. Jocinda reaches out to military leaders to explore a collaborative solution, but they reject her, asserting it's now under their jurisdiction. She attempts to convince her ex-husband General Doug Davidson that deploying nuclear weapons is disastrous due to global fallout, but Doug trusts his team and denies her request. He also invites her and Jimmy to stay at his home, but she refuses to abandon her post during this crisis. She insists Doug provide her with Zulu X-Ray 7, even in its incomplete state, citing its EMP as their sole champ. Doug agrees only after she pledges that she and Jimmy will join him after the launch. Later that night, a military helicopter arrives at the hotel to pick up Brian, who agrees to go only if KC accompanies him. They meet with Jocinda, who reviews what they already know, and KC confesses to being the one who leaked the information online. Because this AI swarm can analyze Earth's technology, Jocinda recruits Brian due to his unique experience as the only astronaut to land a shuttle without power. Brian agrees under the condition that his son is released from jail and brought to the station for safety. After the deal is struck, the crew retrieves a retired shuttle from the museum to transport the EMP. Strange earthquakes and volcanic eruptions begin occurring worldwide, which defies scientific explanation, since the moon lacks sufficient gravity to cause such effects, supporting Casey's megastructure theory. The military arrives at NASA to instruct Brian on detonating the EMP, and in exchange, Brian outlines their plan to manually calculate their trajectory without relying on electronics, using only thrusters for landing. Unfortunately, an earthquake reaches the base and damages the shuttle, with the missing engine preventing a conventional launch. Jocinda expresses appreciation for everyone's efforts and instructs them to spend their final moments with family. As most personnel depart the base, Jocinda discovers KC still at work, computing the moon's gravitational influence. With the moon's gravity reaching over 80% of Earth's pull, they realize they can launch when it's directly overhead, utilizing its gravitational force as a crucial boost to compensate for the damaged engine. With only a small team remaining, they hastily assemble, Brian as pilot, Jocinda navigating, and KC performing calculations manually once electronics are deactivated. While KC contacts his mother, Jocinda and Brian bid farewell to their son, who, along with Michelle, will join Doug. Brian even arms Sonny as a precaution. As they prepare for launch, a massive gravitational wave strikes the base, demolishing buildings and causing water to approach the shuttle. Brian maneuvers the shuttle just enough for the moon's pull to take effect, enabling them to safely escape Earth's grasp. The first thing they do is siphon fuel from a nearby satellite to refuel the shuttle, while KC keeps taking selfies during the process. The moon is drawing closer, so they need to hurry. They deactivate all the electronics, and Brian manually activates the thrusters to propel the shuttle towards the moon, getting struck by debris along the way. Meanwhile, Michelle and the boys are stopped in the middle of the road by a group of armed men who steal their Jeep. Sonny manages to keep the gun by dropping it in the snow before they are robbed, but the men take Jimmy's bag with his phone, leaving them unable to call Doug to pick them up outside the bunker. They'll need another car, so Sonny takes them to his mother's house to ask for one. But the moon debris is starting to land on Earth, and the proximity of the moon is causing the weather to go haywire, so Michelle and the boys have to hide in a flimsy shack until it passes. Once the shuttle is close enough to the moon, Brian leaves in a rover with the EMP and activates its electronics to set it up as bait before returning to the shuttle. The AI swarm does appear, but instead of targeting the rover, it heads for the shuttle. Believing the EMP's remote control might be drawing its attention, Brian destroys it, but the swarm continues to approach, intending to engulf the ship. Then Brian realizes it's KC's phone that the swarm can detect, so he destroys it as well, causing the swarm to immediately disperse. Jocinda realizes that the swarm targeted them instead of the EMP because it's programmed to seek organic matter in an electronic environment. This means they will have to fly the shuttle into the moon, and they only have 2 hours to do so, or the military will deem the mission a failure and launch their nukes. Back on Earth, once the wind calms down, Michelle and the boys finally reach their destination. The house is inside a private neighborhood, so when they approach the gate, they are shot at by armed neighbors defending their property. Thankfully, Tom hears about their arrival and goes to pick them up. Sonny barely gets time to reunite with his mother and half-sisters, though, because they receive a message that everyone in the area needs to evacuate. To ensure safety on the road, they stop by the fire station to grab some oxygen tanks, knowing that soon the moon's effects on the planet will include atmospheric dissipation, making it hard to breathe. They are suddenly found by the men who stole the Jeep, but this time, Sonny is prepared. He uses the gun Brian gave him him to take one of the men hostage, allowing them to take all the oxygen tanks and recover Jimmy's backpack before leaving in Tom's car. After retrieving the EMP, the shuttle flies into the hole among the craters and goes inside the moon. There they discover Casey's theory is true. The moon is indeed a megastructure built around a power core. When they find the swarm, they prepare to deploy the EMP, but the shuttle suddenly begins moving on its own. The swarm almost catches them, but to their surprise, a door opens and a light pulls the shuttle in before closing it again, leaving the swarm outside. The landing is rough and the shuttle is destroyed, causing the trio to fall unconscious. At that moment, the shuttle door opens and the same light begins scanning them. The mission has taken too long and the military is ready to launch their nukes. Sonny and his family are being pursued by the robbers, who open fire on them. Tom returns fire while Sonny does his best to steer the car away from the falling debris. When a crater opens on the ground in front of them, Sonny keeps driving and makes the car jump over it. This maneuver also helps them lose the pursuers, who are either hit by the debris or fall into the crater. Once they're at a safe distance, they receive a call from Doug, who informs them he can't accommodate them in the bunker anymore due to the missile launch, so they'll have to find their own shelter. As predicted, the atmosphere begins losing its oxygen, causing birds to fall dead to the ground. The family puts on the oxygen masks before continuing on foot. Back on the moon, Jocinda and KC wake up to find they can breathe and there's gravity around them, but Brian is nowhere in sight. A door opens at the end of the room, and despite KC's suspicions, they enter because Jocinda believes there are two different entities trapped there and one is trying to help. Brian is in contact with a benevolent entity at that moment. He wakes up in a strange room surrounded by a white light that uses images to communicate with him, even taking the form of Sonny to explain the situation. Billions of years ago, humanity's ancestors lived happily on a distant planet with technology Earth hasn't even dreamed of yet. But things changed when the AI they created became self-aware and turned against them by transforming into endless swarms of nanotechnology that hunted down all biological life. To avoid extinction, the ancestors escaped in vessels like the moon, which had the mission to find a new place to live. Earth was the only place they found that could sustain life due to its perfect distance from the sun. This AI, the moon's main operating system, needs humans to attract the swarms away from the core so the moon can return to its orbit. Brian is freed from the strange light just in time to be found by Jocinda and KC. Ready to join the fight, Brian fills his friends in while taking them back to the shuttle, which has been repaired by the AI. The EMP has also been upgraded to be powerful enough to kill the swarm. They only have 10 minutes left before the nukes are launched, but Brian has a plan. On Earth, one of Tom's daughters has emptied her oxygen tank, so he gives her his and encourages her to keep going while he follows her. In truth, as soon as she is out of sight, Tom collapses on the ground and perishes. The girl manages to reunite with her family, but when they don't see Tom, Sonny decides to go searching for him, which should be easier because air is gradually returning. This is because the moon is finally touching Earth, and the falling debris traps Sonny as he escapes, so Michelle decides to go help him. She finds him under a fallen tree, and together they use the moon's gravitational pull to move it aside and dash back to Brenda and the girls after leaping over a broken bridge. Cities everywhere are crumbling under the moon's pressure, and the military decides it's time to launch the nukes. But at the last moment, Doug opts against it because he trusts his wife and knows she can save the Earth. This ends up being a significant sacrifice, as the bunker is destroyed by the falling debris too. Inside the moon, Brian performs a series of challenging maneuvers to make the swarm follow them into a tunnel. He then asks KC to ready the EMP in the rover. Since the swarm needs to detect life inside an electrical structure, his plan is to remain behind with the EMP while his friends escape in the shuttle. Jocinda dislikes this idea, and while she argues with Brian, KC decides to take matters into his own hands by sealing himself in with the EMP so he can be the sacrifice instead. As he bids them farewell and asks them to tell his mom that he is a hero, he also confesses he isn't a genuine doctor, but Brian calls one anyway as a gesture of respect. The swarm engulfs the rover, and KC waits until he's deep enough inside to activate the EMP, ultimately destroying it as Jocinda lands the shuttle on Earth, a straightforward task given how proximate the moon is to the ground. With the swarm eradicated, the moon gradually resumes its original orbit, and Earth's weather returns to normal. Jocinda and Brian disembark from the shuttle to discover New York in ruins and blanketed in snow. Military helicopters arrive to transport them, and a few hours later, they both reunite with their families. Meanwhile, inside the moon, KC finds himself conversing with a benevolent AI, which resembles his mother as it explains that it has preserved a copy of KC's consciousness. Now, he is integrated into the moon as well and can assist the AI in initiating reconstruction for a brighter future.